All right, and I love all of these comments. This is faster than I'm used to too. So I used to be a trainer and I would train virtually and maybe have 20 people in the class, but we're already at 22 and the chats are coming in. It's so great to see them. Yes, exactly. Homage to your ancestors. Yes. Yeah, and not just, like my mom and my dad who've passed away, but um, my grandparents and people revere, reverence is the other word I was looking for. For whatever reason, words are not coming to me tonight. I guess I haven't had good sleep, but um, yeah, just all of that for not just your immediate ancestors, but ancestors back and back. Absolutely. Oh, I love all of this. The mammoth on the ancestor altar. Okay, so it is 8 o'clock now. And we're going to give, like I said, everybody just a minute or two to get logged in, and then we'll start with introducing ourselves.
Mhm.
And I absolutely agree. Not just your immediate ancestors, but intellectual ancestors. As a queer person, I have a lot of reverence for my queer ancestors, both people that I knew in life before they passed away, and people that are meaningful have been meaningful in the movement for queer rights and things
Mhm.
like that. All right, so it is 8:01. Do you want to go ahead and start us off with introductions, Dove?
Let me confirm that we are ready to start recording.
Okay, that's fair.
Mm, I think the other panel is still doing Q&A, and
Oh,
they might
okay,
hold it recording
yeah,
for a couple more minutes. Sometimes they run a few minutes over. Just
and
gives
that is
people more time to
absolutely
get over
fine.
here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they've got 17 people in the audience still, and some of those will probably show up here after that's over.
Also, in addition to ancestors, I also want to say relations. So some of us might have people who are not ancestral to us, but maybe they're younger than us and they passed away.
Mhm.
And we still have connections to them. So our relations and people that we care about, we talk to those folks too. Actually, my neighbor, Karen, we ended up talking to her and spending a lot of time with her at the end of her life, and she's an amazing person. And some of her things are on my ancestor altar because
Mhm.
she just really means a lot to me, and so that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, we have things on the ancestor altar for all of the people that we've loved who have passed away. It doesn't really matter what the nature of the relationship is. They don't have to be your ancestors.
Oh, and I'm loving this. I'm totally going to download what Pax sent and read that. Working with our queer ancestors. I'm also waiting to learn about, and I'm going to probably pronounce it wrong, Yuan Fen, and please tell me how to pronounce it if I have butchered it. Oh, connection formed from past lives. I love that so much too. We're going to get into that just a little bit, sort of the
Mhm.
concept of that. Just talking about, that's one way that people experience alter humanity, right? That it's, some folks say for them it's a connection to a past life experience. Other folks,
Mhm.
that's not their experience of it, but a lot of people do. Welcome, everybody. If you're just coming into the room, we are waiting just a minute or two for the other panel to wrap up so that this panel can stop recording or start recording. Before we really get started, we're just kind of conversing right now with folks in the chat. And what path does uh, Yuan Fen come from, if you don't mind me asking? So curious. That's so amazing. Oh, okay. It's already recording. So we
Okay,
actually
good.
probably could go ahead and start.
I think it's been 5 minutes. I think that's probably long enough. We can go ahead and get started. And I will start with introducing us. Uh, we are, of course, the Court of Crows. Four of us will be speaking at various points tonight. We're probably not going to announce when we switch who's fronting. Uh, it won't really be important. But I am an ordained pagan priestess. I've been ordained since 2014, so this is what I do as a full-time job. And I've been involved with the Alterhuman community since 2005. And I, Dove, am a Cacodemon dragon, a Hellenic underworld spirit. And I'm a priestess of Hecate and a daughter of Nyx. And Illyra, who will probably show up to talk about animism for a little bit, is a Fey Jaguar who was born and raised as an animal, and she's a druid animist. And Riss is a Shadowkai elf from Faerun who's going to step in and help us with a section on pop culture paganism. She's a former member of a martial religious order dedicated to the Raven Queen. And Nisha is our resident eldritch alien goddess. She is a patron goddess of madness and insects from a pantheon that people mostly know as Lovecraftian.
Right, and I am also a member of a system. My system name is Myco Network. We are all practitioners of animistic spirituality, and most of us are longtime students of spiritual practice in general. Um, so we have a lot of fronters, some of whom are original fiction kin, and some of whom front in this reality. I, Brett, am going to be the main person talking for Myco Network in this portion of our talk, and then we are going to do a 18 plus talk about sacred kink, and Eli, another headmate of mine, is going to do that. All right, I think I am ready for you to advance the slide. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right, so first off, really want to say that this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of spiritualities that alter humans have. Instead, it's really just our attempt to present and discuss a variety of ways that alter humans we know, or us, practice spirituality as a way of offering alternatives you might not have considered. And everything we have to say is from personal experience and research, and obviously it won't necessarily apply to everybody, so take from it anything that is useful to you and leave the rest. And again, the sacred kink portion will take place in an 18 plus space after the main event has concluded, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And if you would please, Dove, next slide.
Mhm.
All right. So this did not actually print notes on this page, so I'm kind of gonna wing it a little bit.
It's on the
Um,
next page.
Okay, thank you so much. So, animism is a spiritual path founded on the belief that all of material reality and everything in material reality contains spirit, soul stuff, or consciousness. And it does not assume that humans are the only beings possessed of the divine spark, or that humans are the only beings that have access to spirituality or an eternal soul. Subjects within an animistic landscapes might differ by tradition. So that means that subjects may include features like the land, rivers, mountains, forest, animals, plants, fungi, or even objects in the house or tools or the house itself. And different traditions of animism may really put a lot of weight on the subjectivity of some beings within materiality and not others so much. But animists are primarily interested in the relationship that humans have with non human subjects and also that humans have with each other. But basically, animism doesn't presuppose the subject object relationship in the reality humans interact with. So, again, I think in some of the chats we talked about the predominant culture that some of us live in the West in America, and there is this belief that we have quote unquote dominance over other beings in our reality, or that humans are somehow number one, and that's not at all an animistic belief. And because I, as an animist, assume that everything I interact with is possessed of consciousness and soul stuff, for me, that means I necessarily assume that I should treat all of these subjects with respect, and so that I don't offend the divine with my carelessness. So that's kind of a core to many people's animistic practice, is this relationship with everything in reality. Um, but again, it might differ. Some people have very strong respectful relationships toward plants and animals, and maybe less strong ones toward objects. I try to tread with caution, even on my carpet. Um, the
Mhm.
assumption isn't that non-humans I interact with have consciousness or mind that's different than mine. Um, Sorry, let me rephrase. The assumption is that non humans I interact with have a consciousness or mind that's different than mine, and one that maybe I don't understand, but it's not lesser. And then again, another core tenet or thing I want to get across about animism is it's not so much a spirituality in and of itself, but a descriptive way of practicing spirituality and a way of organizing reality. So just like theism is the belief in a God that organizes things, you can be a Christian animist, though that differs significantly than like what again mainstream Christianity might say. Um, or any a Hindu animist, you can be a pagan animist, you can be an animist practicing any number of traditional indigenous beliefs. In fact, I would make the argument that most spiritualities have some animistic threads in them. And this is because, okay, next slide.
Next slide.
Okay, so this is a super, super complicated slide, and Dove is actually going to put a link to an
I
even
sure
more
am.
complicated version of this slide that you can like zoom in on and look at. But this is a version of the evolution of religion map, and it's not uncontested, which means that there's
You know,
definitely somebody that there are lots of scholars that are going to contest this as an idea, but what you're looking at is a map depicting the growth of various religions over time. And one thing you'll note in this map is that the foundation of all of them is a quote unquote proto religion that is animistic in nature. So that a lot of scholarship will say that the scholars kind of believe that animistic beliefs kind of underpin human spirituality, and that it's very old. And there are a lot of good reasons for this if you're interested in the ways that animistic belief serves humanity, like why it actually just might be good for humans to be animists and, good for us. There's a book called The Seven Laws of Magical Thinking by Matthew Hudson that kind of goes into like, why might it be safer that I have these ideas about contamination, or that I treat my local river, with respect, right, and don't pollute it. And he goes into some of those concepts. But you can kind of think about it intuitively, right? If I'm thinking of my local river with respect and not polluting it, I'm not going to get sick, right? So those kinds of beliefs and how they might be helpful. In that vein, animism should probably be distinguished from other closely related concepts like panpsychism.
treat your local river with respect or you'll catch this river's hands.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Um, so there's other really like similar or nearby beliefs like panpsychism, and that's a view I also hold that basically says everything is like consciousness and viewing things as universal. or pantheism, the idea that God is within all immanent, within all materiality. But those beliefs, while kind of adjacent to animism, are not required or are not necessarily part of animism, the belief that everything is ensouled. Or that lots of things can be ensouled. Again, not everybody
Mhm.
believes that everything can be ensouled, but that lots of things can be ensouled and have souls. Um, so you can be a panpsychist and a pantheist and an animist all at the same time, but you don't have to be one to be the other. There's kind of distinctions there. And I'm going to say that, in my opinion at least, animism is way more about how you act than your philosophical positions, but other folks might disagree with me on that. All right, and I am ready for the next slide.
Yeah. We're we'll get into it more in a minute, but the chat is showing us exactly why animism is relevant to alter humanity because we have folks like sound mixers and actual rivers in the audience listening to us talk about animism.
I love that so much. And yes, so now we're going to get into, what in the heck does all of this have to do with alterhuman spirituality? Um, so in many indigenous cultures, and many cultures just in general, animals, plants, objects, forces of nature are seen as our ancestors and siblings. And when you experience these feelings of having had a past life, or in your mind and your body, you can feel in your body having, these feelings of being an animal or plant or an object or force of nature. And when you feel that your soul stuff is partially made up of something not human, the again predominant Western quote unquote paradigm can make you feel very full of shame or crazy. Or I think that there's definitely a shaming element in certain
Hmm.
elements of society. And I think it's really important for us to just become aware of. And I mean, I can see all through the chat, folks are already aware of this. So I'm maybe not making everybody aware of it. But for me, discovering animism went a long way toward validating my internal insights and
Hmm.
making me feel confident. And just to know that these intuitions and feelings are
Hmm.
right and correct, and
And
that other people who would shame me are incorrect or wrong.
that
Um,
there are so
yes,
many
go ahead.
cultures all over the world that by default validate the kind of beliefs that we have here. Um, and we aren't qualified to speak in detail on specific beliefs of most indigenous cultures with regard to things like reincarnation because we're not part of all of those indigenous cultures. But broadly, we can say that there are plenty of animistic traditions that explicitly believe in some form of uh, the concept of the transmigration of the soul, which is the idea that a soul that was human in one life or animal in another life may be human or animal or plant or even an object in another life. That what you are now does not define what you have been and what you will be in other lives, in other worlds. That this experience is not the only experience you're going to have. There are numerous examples in Celtic mythology of references to shapeshifting into animals, plants, and objects that are commonly understood to be metaphors for this concept of transmigration and reincarnation. And that's just one culture that has examples of these, that it's very common. Uh, I actually looked up a few citations for examples in Celtic animistic traditions. These are mostly from a set of stories called the Ulster Cycle. If you look for the stories of, there's the story of Bailey and Aelin, which features two people who die and become trees in their next life, and the story of the birth of Taliesin, where he is gifted this magical wisdom and transforms himself into various animal shapes, trying to escape from Caradwyn. And Caradwyn is a metaphor for death. And in a poem called The Song of Taliesin, uh, Taliesin speaks at length about concepts such as reincarnation, and I will share with you one of the stanzas of this poem. Taliesin says, I have been a fierce bull and a yellow buck. I have been a boat upon the sea. I have been the foam of water. I have been a drop in the air. I have journeyed high as an eagle. I have been a tree stump in a shovel. I have been an axe in the hand. I have been a spotted snake on a hill. I have been a wave breaking upon the beach. On a boundless sea I was set adrift. In the next stanza, he talks about the beginning of his life as the person who later becomes Taliesin. So he is very explicitly talking about reincarnation as plants and animals and objects and forces of nature.
Yeah. So basically, I think a lot of us who grew up within one of the Western traditions that maybe has moved it farther away from its animistic roots might feel like we can't claim the study of animism or animistic traditions because we don't have a quote unquote right to them. But animism is basic to humanity, I think, and it's not copyrighted. So I would also say that I've read works of many indigenous folks. I'm going to go ahead and give some later on, just provide a citation. But Doug Goodfeather, for instance, um, Robin Wall Kimmerer, that really want us to learn this way of thinking because it's a desperate bid for Western society to learn to respect our environment before we destroy ourselves. So trying to reteach these beliefs can be very healing for the earth, and for all of us. Um, and I personally believe that you should find a path or many paths and really just study it or them. There's a lot of wisdom from our ancestors. And by this, I don't necessarily mean your direct ancestors, but humanity's ancestors, and all of that has immense worth. So there's lots of open animistic traditions that you can follow that are still, heavily rooted in animism. Um, and when I say open, I don't just mean like, you know, uh, read a book and call yourself a practitioner. A lot of them do require you to study a lot or under a particular teacher or to embark on an initiation path, but they're open in that you can be allowed to seek and study, and become an initiate. And this is true of, just all types of spirituality. So feel free to do some research. Um, and I would also just say if you're going to study more than one path, and this is totally just, Brett's personal beliefs, um, not to mix them up. So my headmates and I are, we different headmates study different paths, and we try to refrain from mixing them together and really trust the truth of the path that we're studying. And it works very well internally. And, of course, there's personal gnosis that happens out of that, but just trying to respect the history and beliefs of the path that you're studying and not just mush it all together, like I've seen done. So that's just personally my, like, I would recommend trying to really stay true to the paths you're studying and keep them separate if you're studying multiple ones. Not that you can't understand like how they might, like patterns and things, but just being aware of not just whitewashing or mushing stuff together. Um, yes, absolutely. Cultural context informs your practice. That's why, there's a huge history and we respect all of the wisdom of the people that created and have, been on a path for years and years and years and for centuries. Um, so that said, even without a framework, there are some practices that will sort of start you down a path of what I think of as right relation with your kin in this reality. And I have some book recommendations that I'm going to put in the chat, but if I could have the next slide. Okay, so these are just some animistic exercises you can try. There are some that I found in books, that have really worked well for me, or that I've again, like insights that I've had from my gods, etc. But one is just recognizing subjects. So that's just like saying hello to animals, plants, and anything else you think might be ensouled in your environment, and just practicing that on the daily. So one thing that I do is when I drive to work in the morning, I start as I walk out my door by trying to say hi to all of the animal people that I see. So we have a local deer tribe that hangs out in our yard, and I'll say hi to the deer people if I see them. I'll say hi to the, plant people and the grass people and the tree people. Um, I might say hi to the snow, like, and at first you might feel really weird doing this, but I really believe that it changes your relationship with um, these beings by recognizing their subjectivity, by greeting them and saying hi. Another thing that you can do is I mentioned I call the deer tribe the deer people. You can change the names of what you call things if you feel like the name is objectifying to the other being, then you can ask something what it wants to be called. So I have a story. I was growing a
Mm.
mushroom, not that kind of mushroom, actually. I haven't yet tried to embark on that, but I was growing a lion's mane mushroom that I had been
Yes,
gifted
our
by
cat has been
Dove.
heard.
I'm sorry?
Yes, our cat has been heard. Pyewacket was just yelling at me.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yes. Speaking of subjects, it's time for his nightly snack in 30 minutes, but he doesn't have a concept of time like we do, so he's hungry. It's snack time. Uh, but um, so this mushroom, asked it what it wanted to be called and waited for a response. And I got a very strong, I want to be called Mortimer. And I thought, okay, that's crazy. That's a crazy ass name. I haven't heard of that. And I ended up looking up Mortimer, and it ended up being a joke. So the White Lion of Mortimer is a historical figure, and it's lion's mane mushroom, right? So they wanted to be called Mortimer. And I was like, okay, whoa, that's kind of freaky. Like that name wasn't in my mind. And that happened. So,
The mushroom
ask.
made a joke that you didn't understand.
Yeah, like ask something what it wants to be called and listen, and you might be surprised. Another practice is deep listening. So, I've been reading some different books. One is called The Spell of the Sensuous, by David Abram, and there's another one called Becoming Animal. I recommend them highly. They're great books. And he really talks about specifically how human language, as it got farther and farther away from being pictographic, and even when it started to be written down, but especially when it started to get farther away from being pictographic, that really weakened or diluted some of our animism. So he is really big on listening to animals speak and thinking of it as speech. So when you listen to the bird song, it's bird speech. And really trying to, I know there was another, I don't remember which chat, but we were talking about animals and people who are good with animal language, body language. Pay attention, that deep attention to how beings in the environment, and you don't have to just do that with animals. There was a person who, in one of the books, described the language of trees and being able to know different things about the trees, the forest, the weather conditions by the way the trees spoke. These were sounds going through the leaves, but thinking of it as speech actually really changed the ability to attune with that in the natural environment. So that's another practice. um, I'm gonna have to come upstairs and give Pius crunchies. He's really making himself known. But yeah, we're gonna post
He's a
that reading
feature, not a
list.
bug.
I'm sorry, what?
He's a feature, not a bug.
Yes, he is. He is a feature not. I'm downstairs, so I'm not hearing him. Um, for some reason. Another practice is gratitude, prayers and practices. So again, I think the practice of gratitude is a big part of that relationship and just thanking. An example is food, right? A blessing over food. So I say a food blessing when I remember, which I always pray to remember and I often forget, but just simple like, thank you for whatever died to nourish me. I honor you. Thank you for the hands that produced this food for me. I honor you. Thank you to, and then name your personal deities who gifted me with this food and this bounty and blessings, and I honor you, that kind of thing. And then just saying, I'm grateful for this gift. And trying to do that with all the gifts you're getting, but especially when you're taking from anything. So, that's a lot in our society, right? Your napkins come from trees. Our napkins come from trees. Our all the plastic stuff comes from the bones of dinosaurs, right? All the food we eat comes from plants and animals. So thanking the thing that you're taking from that made a sacrifice for you and being grateful for that. Um, it might also extend to offerings. So like I said, we have a local deer tribe that likes to hang out on our land, and we have birds, so we feed them. You can put out an offering to whomever. um, for animals, one of my headmates talked about we gave an offering to the wasps on our property. We just gave some honey to them. Um, and again, some of these practices, they're important not only for what they're doing for the beings in your environment, but because they're changing how we think and how we relate to the environment and to those around us. And then the last thing is just right actions. Um, basically, this idea of praying and trying to do what is right and respecting everything. So just trying to change your thinking of like, how am I interacting with beings in the environment and am I being respectful? And I really suck at this, but I try to be good at it. So just little things like, you know, did I really need to take 5 napkins? Or am I really that messy? Or am I going to throw some away clean? Can I maybe take 2 napkins? Or what, can I take a shorter shower? Just thinking about those things and thinking about it. And I'm seeing some chats about things like a gift economy, like thinking about like, what am I taking? What is sacrificing for me? And what am I giving? What am I giving back?
Mhm.
And is that relationship balanced? And if it's unbalanced, what can I do to rebalance it? And one thing I'll say is I'm not one of those people that's unrealistic. I know they say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. We don't have to be perfect. This is about,
Mhm.
you know, making an effort. And I think it's gonna change. I think we can change the world that way. Okay. I think that is the end of my animistic portion, and now we're moving on to resources. Um, so I think this is just going to be, next slide, please, a list of books that Dove is going to copy and paste, or we can do it afterwards. And basically, I'll send you a bunch of the books that I read that I really liked, and there's tons more. But okay, now we're on to mythology for mythological
Yeah,
creatures. Turning back over to you, Dove.
the PowerPoint is not playing nice with me copying links into the chat. It wants to post them as images, which is not going to work. So I will have to figure out how to get the actual text to paste as text, and then I will be able to give everybody a list of books. We have something like 20 books. But on the topic of mythology, you know, this is mostly for the benefit of those of us who are mythological creatures or some kind of creature that has a uh, connection with being sacred in a religion, that sort of thing. So, for those of us in the audience who are mythological creatures, uh, fulcenteric creatures, it's another great term. I love that one. Um, Often, the easiest place to begin uh, is the culture of origin of that mythology. So, um, for dragons, that can be anything. Almost every culture has dragons. But say if you're a phoenix, uh, it might be helpful to look into Greek or Egyptian mythology, where as a phoenix you might explore a relationship with Helios or Ra. In Kemet, in Egyptian religion, Ra is said to be the father of the phoenix. And in Greek tradition, the phoenix is described as journeying to the temple of Helios in Egypt and being reborn in the temple. Uh, for a kitsune, uh, Shinto might be something that you want to research, which is not a closed religion. Uh, Always, it's important to approach any religion, any cultural tradition with respect and wanting to actually understand the cultural context. But there's lots of books that you can read on Shinto. There's people in Japan that you can reach out to and communicate with who will be happy to teach you things. There's lots of Shinto practitioners in the US. Uh, we actually, one of our neighbors runs a Japanese martial arts dojo. He's from America, but spent years stationed in Japan and picked up a lot of Shintoism, and that's a big part of his personal practice. And it is also part of the practice of all of his students, many of whom have not been to Japan. So that is not a culture that you can't have. It's just another culture to approach with respect and try to really understand. But so, if you're a kitsune and Shinto seems like something that appeals to you, there's books that you can look for on subjects like Inari Okami, who is the patron deity of Kitsune. And I think that I have a couple of books on topics like that that I can include in our book list. Um, Angels and demons are another really common one. I'm sure there's quite a few angels and demons in the audience at the moment, actually. And that concept is not just associated with Abrahamic religions, but angels and demons by that or other names occur in uh, lots of cultures from the Middle East. Uh, they came into Judaism and Islam and Christianity from other Middle Eastern cultures. So, not just looking at those traditions, but also Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology might be a place to look. Yes, Zoroastrianism is one of the traditions that originated a lot of what we understand today as angels and demons. So that's another one that would be very useful to look into. Um, there's also several of the named demons that we see in mainstream traditions and that appear in things like the Goetia are actually Philistine deities and other uh, dead religions of the Middle East, some of which are completely lost and not practiced by anyone anymore. We know so little about that one that there's not that much to reconstruct. And another one of the elements that has informed the modern understanding of angels and demons is actually my tradition, Hellenismos, Greek. Uh, the word demon comes from the Greek daemon, which just means spirit. And most of the imagery and depictions of demons comes from Hellenic cacodemons, uh, malevolent or underworld spirits. Uh, Most of the imagery that we have for concepts of hell is from Tartarus. That's where Dante's Inferno takes most of its imagery from conceptions of Tartarus in the Greek tradition. Uh, but none of this should suggest that you should, you in any way have to stick with culture of origin. If you're a Phoenix, you don't have to stick with Hellenic and Kemetic traditions. Uh, you can do anything you want forever. But religion of origin is a great place to begin. It's just a good jumping off point. My personal example, I was actually raised in Hellenismus. My family is Greek. Uh, so I grew up with my grandmother teaching me both Hellenic traditions and some Christian things. She identified herself as sort of a Christo-pagan witch. But the only reason that I stayed with Hellenism is because I am a cacodemon. I am one of these underworld spirits. Uh, in Hellenismus, dragons are often depicted as children of gods, uh, guardians of sacred sites. Um, for example, the Colchian dragon, who guarded the spring that later became the site of the founding of the city of Thebes, was a child of Ares. And I am a daughter of Nyx, and became a servant of Hecate, and I have followed her for so long that I don't remember anything else. There, in any life, is not a time before that was my path, and it always seems to come back to me. I actually sort of play a role in some elements of Greek mythology. There's a play called Medea by the Greek playwright Euripides that is in turn based on older mythology. And my brother and I make an appearance at the very end of that play to rescue Medea from a cliff. And I play my role in the underworld, guarding one of the entrances to Tartarus and hunting down malicious spirits. And I find great comfort in that, in having that place in this tradition that is rooted in ancient culture and tradition. So I find it very meaningful for me, and my hope is that some other people might find meaning in something similar that relates to their own Alterhuman identity. I wrote in my notes uh, to say that that basically makes me underworld law enforcement and the obligatory ACAB. Suppose I have to include myself in that. But in practice, in yes, all of the ACABs in the chat. Thank you. All means all. Sorry. Yeah, I know. I'm a bastard. Ask anybody. But in terms of how all of this gets applied in my actual life, in my day to day, and not just in theory and in past lives, is that my daily practice and my entire spirituality is centered around my service to Hecate. I maintain an altar dedicated to Hecate and to ancestor worship. The ancestor altar that we talked about also has my statues of Hecate and Persephone and Hades on it. And service to her is why I built the church that we now run. And I've done a lot of work in homelessness advocacy and supporting the queer community as she is a patron goddess of outcasts and especially the homeless, but everyone who's on the fringes of society. So I dedicate my all of my work as an advocate as an act of dedication to her. Basically, my entire life is defined by that service, and I do daily devotionals to my gods. I light incense. I pray. I greet Nyx when the night falls every night. I meditate daily. And yeah, just as I served as a guardian and bounty hunter in the underworld, uh, here I am very dedicated to protecting my people and my community. And I found myself often called to deal with malevolent spirits here when whenever anybody has problems like that, they tend to come to me. So I've done a lot of being called because somebody felt like there was something not good in their house. I don't even I don't even see what I'm being teased about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I figured you were looking at the chat. V said, "Does it really count if you're guarding the laws of reality?" And I said, "All means all, V." And anyway, yeah, sorry.
Yes, yes. All means all. It's okay. I'm a bastard. Everybody knows I'm a bastard. I'm proud of being a bastard. I'm also a crow. It's part of the job.
I was gonna say you're a
I wouldn't be
bastard
a
in the
very
same
good
way our
crow if I
cat.
wasn't a bastard.
Yeah, in the same way our cat is a bastard. A very different kind of. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm totally getting off topic. I didn't mean
It's all
to.
right. We have to get a little off topic. It's an Alter Humanity panel. It's
Yeah, it's
required.
required.
It's part of the experience. Um, so as Brett gave us a list of 20 um, animism books, it's really kind of hard to give recommended reading or resources for mythology as a whole. Um, Finding something that is relevant to everyone is a little bit challenging, but if anybody's interested in any specific traditions, I might have some books on specific traditions and possibly also books that are particularly relevant to alter humanity within a specific tradition. I think that I already have something that is Kitsune themed. I obviously have a lot of books on Hellenic mythology and tradition, but anybody who would like to DM me or tag me anywhere in the server and ask for something specific, I can probably help you out. I realized I was supposed to change the slide about halfway through that, and I didn't. But now I think we can move on to pop culture paganism. So first of all, what is pop culture paganism? People are excited about pop culture paganism. Uh, Pop culture paganism is one of several terms for building a religious or spiritual practice that's around fictional cultures, religions, and spirits, which is, for obvious reasons, a perfect spiritual home for a lot of fiction. Um, the term fiction based religion also exists for traditions that don't fit within a pagan framework. Uh, and we've also heard the term neo mythic, which I kind of like. I think that's a good one. But our personal experiences from a pagan perspective, uh, everybody in this body has always been pagan, so pop culture paganism is the term that we use. And it's worship of things like divine beings of the Pokemon universe. Uh, if you're treating the legendaries as deities, which I know there's a lot of Pokemon in here, so like that's an example of pop culture paganism. Or I've heard of people who built spiritual traditions around Tolkien's Valar, and obviously everybody knows Lovecraft. Everybody knows the Cult of Cthulhu. There are plenty of people who actually do build a spiritual practice around Lovecraftian mythos or beings that are adjacent to the Lovecraftian mythos. Technically, myself included, we'll hear a little bit more from the Lovecraftian pantheon a little bit later. But in my case, it's this is Riss speaking now. Completely different cultural framework from Dove. Uh, in my case, it's the gods of Faerun, uh, which all of you know is one of the main settings for Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, None of this is a new idea. Pop culture paganism really isn't new. Um, People have been basing real spirituality around things like the Great Old Ones and Tolkien's Valar for almost as long as those works of fiction have existed. There's been people who have been doing rituals for them for well over 100 years. It's not an internet phenomenon or anything like that. And really, if you think about it, isn't all mythology just really old fiction? Yes, Jediism. Uh, there are some who practice Jediism who wouldn't consider it pulp culture paganism because it's kind of adjacent to the pagan framework, but it's not, for instance, a polytheistic religion. So that's one of the ones that just frequently uses the term fiction based religion instead of calling it pop culture paganism. But it can be considered to fall into that category, and it's a self designation. It's, do you want to call yourself that? But yeah, all mythology is really just really old fiction. Somebody made it up at some point, and it's all equally real. Everything's real. Everything's real as much as reality is real, which reality isn't really real either. But that's a little off topic. um, and really, in fact, a lot of mainstream religion, mainstream paganism. Yes, we have a Myco has a system member who is a vampire who worships energy in a way that is kind of similar to Jediism.
Yeah, I mean, he's interested in the Force in Jediism, but also concepts like chi and prana.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, like he just had that revelation, and it was kind of funny.
It was really great to watch that happen in real time. But yeah, even some of the more mainstream religions, or at least mainstream pagan religions, aren't actually that old. Um, Wicca, for instance, is only 130-ish years old. It got started in only the 1910s, 1920s, and has its own body of mythology. Wicca does not use the same mythology as other older European pagan religions that it's largely based on. Uh, they have some traditions that don't come from the Celtic background that they pulled most of their imagery from. Some of them are just things that Gardner came up with, and they're just as valid religion. They have some gods that appear in some sects of Wicca that are not older pagan gods, and they're just as valid. They're just as real, and they're towing that line of pop culture paganism because the difference between mythology and fiction has more to do with how old it is than anything else. In Hellenismos, a lot of what we have to work from for the body of mythology of Hellenismos is plays, is fiction. So, at some point, all of it was new. I had a lot of fun putting this picture in here. I just had to use the Cult of Cthulhu reference. In terms of actually starting on building a pop culture paganism practice, which there are some traditions that exist. If you look, you will very easily find other people who are practicing some of these traditions, but they tend to be very small, they're very new, and what you can find out there that's already being done may not be for you. So you might have to workshop some things of your own, which is true for everybody's spirituality. What works for everybody else isn't necessarily always for you. So, sometimes you have to come up with your own traditions. Everybody has their own personal, private practice. Yes, fungus hive minds. Love us a good hive mind. I'm not biased because I've been dating one. But, yes, unverified personal gnosis for the win. With pop culture paganism, uh, it's all uh, personal gnosis, unverified or verified, which if more than one person has experienced the thing, can be considered actually verified personal gnosis. Water's important, folks. Yes, talking about UPG is good. I'm here for it. I will be here for that panel. But I think the best place to start for creating your own personal practice in terms of pop culture paganism is you treat it like a recon religion, which is a reconstruction of a dead religion. So most pagan traditions, uh, any religion that there has been a point in time where no one was practicing it, and then someone had to put together how to practice it today is considered a recon religion or a reconstructed religion. And they're reconstructed mostly using existing texts. So for Hellenismos, things like Hesiod and Homer are the texts that they use, and they're reconstructed using archaeology and unverified personal gnosis. There's a lot of intuition involved. And of course, reconstructing a fictional religion isn't going to be exactly like reconstructing a religion from this world. Uh, at least we usually have a source text. And how much detail that source text is going to go into is going to vary a lot. But whatever your source is, you read it for both explicit and implicit relevant to spirituality. Sorry, y'all. I'm having a little trouble speaking. My throat hates me.
Well, you have been speaking pretty much nonstop for quite some time, so I think we can allow you a second to grab a little drink and rest your throat because speaking for such a long time does tend to do that to people.
Yeah, especially me. Our throat's kind of a mess.
Yeah, drink that water though.
Hmm.
Do you have water? Do you need me to ferry some water up to you?
I do have water.
Okay, just checking.
I'm smart sometimes. So, when we're looking at source text for information about spirituality, uh, yes, descriptions of rituals and temples and clergy in the source setting are very important, but you can also look at things like idioms and superstitions and other elements of culture because religion and culture are always tied together. So everything about the source and the culture that appears in this source can help inform how you would go about practicing. And if there's not a lot of material that seems relevant, or rather, if there is a lot of material that is relevant to spirituality, or even if there's not, uh, it might not match your experience, and that's okay. You don't have to work with things that don't fit for you personally. Because, first of all, you can be a heretic. Lots of people do it. It's fine. You can practice any way you want. People who practice religions from this world don't necessarily do it the same way everybody else is doing it. Might have beliefs that are completely different from the mainstream. You don't have to keep the parts that don't feel right to you. Um, and particularly in pop culture paganism, in what is effectively, I lost my train of thought for a moment, but you're often working from a secondhand account written by an outside observer. Same is true in pop culture paganism as it is in regular paganism. Um, the Norse pantheon, the source texts that we have for heathenry, for Saxon and Norse traditions, is mostly written by Christian monks, some of them 200 years after there was nobody practicing heathen religions anymore. And the same is true of every kind of pop culture paganism. Your source material that you're working from is a writer who is writing to entertain. And from our perspective, they're writing about something that was real. But from their perspective, they're writing what they thought the narrative required. So it may not actually reflect the experience of somebody who lived there. You know, death of the author.
Yeah. So basically, that idea that sometimes the author is going to be wrong. So, I mean, of course, those of us that have studied literature and whatever, we talk about death of the author differently in whatever the circles we have now than they talk about it in literary theory or whatever. But basically, you can read something into the text, and if it's there, it's there. So feel confident that it's there, and you don't need anybody's permission to read that in. Okay, sorry, I was giving you a chance to hopefully clear your throat and get some water.
Which was very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
uh, if there's not a lot of information on religious practice in the source material, uh, which is largely true for me personally, uh, in texts about Faerun as a D&D setting, there's lots of depictions of religion, but not usually. So there's a little bit more flying blind happening there. But there will be similarities to cultures from this world. And when a culture in a piece of fiction resembles a culture from this world, we can generally assume that that similarity is going to go beyond what was actually in the text. We can't have archaeological digs in a fictional world, but we can use what we know about this one. So, for instance, Faerun, at least the Sword Coast, kind of resembles pre-Christian Europe. So we can pull some elements from some of those cultures, some of those traditions, particularly where there's an obvious connection between a specific culture in Faerun and a real culture. So we can look at things like the Raven Queen, who I have followed for so long I can't remember, uh, quite resembles the Morrigan. So where there's something that is missing from textual accounts discussing the Raven Queen and Shatterkai, I can kind of fill in the blanks with a combination of my memory and things about the Morrigan, or Sehanin, who is one of the elven deities in Fabrian. There's a strong resemblance to Artemis. So, what is true of how you would worship Artemis can be applied to if you're a follower of Sehanin. And Nisha, who will be joining us a little later, uh, mostly coincidentally, strongly resembles Inanna in Sumerian mythology. So, building a tradition around her could look an awful lot like ancient traditions around Inanna. And one that's a little bit less traditional pagan framework, uh, going back to Jediism. Uh, in the Star Wars canon, the Jedi resemble samurai, and there's elements of Buddhism and Shinto in Jediism. So when there's something missing from that practice that you want a way to include, looking at Buddhism as a way you could do it.
I just want to point out right now that Riss seems to have completely missed that Eli says mostly coincidentally just means the gods didn't read Nisha in on her resemblance to Inanna, but we don't think it was coincidental, at least not in the traditional sense, any more than it was coincidental that Mortimer was named Mortimer. But anyway, please continue.
Thank you for that distraction so I can clear my throat. So, my personal example, as Dove did a little bit ago, uh, I was what we call the shadow dancer. I was a member of a martial religious order that was dedicated to the Raven Queen. So, our daily practice, which I remember, involved a lot of meditation and martial arts training. And actually, most of what I did for a living was assassinations. Generally, uh, we pursued people who cheated fate and were generally largely disruptive. And we had a practice that centered around offering of mementos and memories to the Raven Queen, which then was often literal with physical objects that I could actually give to her or give to a passing raven. My life involved a lot of having conversations with birds and then giving them something shiny and watching them fly off, which it can be challenging to implement religious practices from other worlds in this one. I can't exactly carry out assassinations in the name of a deity here, mostly because the body's disabled. You know, maybe if I was able-bodied, it'd be different, but I won't be doing that here.
And
Or
also because you look really well, actually, you do look really good in orange, but I don't think you would look it in stripes or that drab gray or brown. Move along.
I don't like stripes. But we also often in these sources have much more powerful magic at our disposal. So there's things that we might have been able to do there that are not accessible here. Sometimes you have to sell for something that's a little bit more symbolic. So, for instance, everybody else in this body and also this entire household is very focused on having an ancestor altar. And that works really well for me because we display mementos of the dead, important objects that belong to people who have passed on or photos of people who have passed on. And tending to that altar serves as a devotional act for me. And not too long ago, I joined a martial arts dojo because that was always part of my practice was martial arts, and I will not be using chain weapons in this body, which was my favorite. But we did swords and knives as well. So now I've taken up a Japanese sword martial art, and I go to the dojo as a devotional act. But a lot of what I used to do boils down to being willing and able to fight for my community, and I'm still very much ready to do so. So I actively make sure that I'm ready to do so. Uh,
Hey, Riz.
Zira asks Kendo by chance,
Yes.
and no, actually, what's that?
I was drawing your attention to Zira's question because I thought you'd want to answer it. So
Yeah,
you're picking up what I'm putting down before I'm even putting it down.
yeah. I'm kind of skimming the chat. I can't read everything, especially the longer posts, but I get the gist. And I saw Kendo. No, it's actually um, Nakamura Ryo Batodo. Batodo is a family of Japanese sword arts, and Nakamura is the founder of this specific art. And I won't go into the whole history of the martial art. That's the one that I'm practicing. Um, one thing in my practice that pretty much can be the same is nightly prayer and meditation is something that we do every night, perhaps not as consistently as we should, but we try, we do our best. And it's not 4 hours of meditation every night like it used to be, but I still meditate. And similarly, it's kind of hard to provide resources and further reading on this. I think there may be some essays out there that I could put in the chat, but other than that, if anybody is interested in help with ideas for building a tradition around a specific source, uh, our DMs are always open, and I'm happy to hear from everybody. Anything to add?
No, just that this just in. I think Eli is going to do the Divine Kim portion with Nisha, and just a warning: he has a New York accent. It's it's backstory. He's original
Mm.
fiction Ken. So, and we like to do accents, so it helps us differentiate from each other. Anyway, continue.
And y'all lived in New York for years, so you
We
pick it
did
up
do that,
naturally.
yes. And I also had a great grandmother from New Orleans, like literally in the city of New Orleans with the New Orleans accent. So I think it probably has elements of that too, because we're very southern. But
Hmm.
anyway, doesn't matter. Just if you pick up on it,
Mm.
that's what it is. And the
So,
divine contrition. Yes, yes.
uh-huh.
Continue.
Even gods have something to learn, which is why we're here. We all subscribe to the theory that the reason that anybody is here, the reason that physical reality exists, is as a learning experience. There's things that we can learn here in these bodies with these limitations that you can't learn in the context that we come from. And that applies even to gods. We're not perfect. We still have things to learn, which is why I'm here. And we all need support. So, divine or not, we can all benefit from relationships with others who currently have a broader perspective. So, spiritual practice is important. having having contact with somebody who can see a little bit further than we can with people who are currently experiencing their reality as divine and not being limited by these meat sacks is very useful. The title of this slide, Gods Don't Pray, is a joke at my expense.
Yeah, it's a troll
A
the
reference
nation.
to an It's a reference to an Imagine Dragons.
Yeah, but you were always also saying gods don't pray whenever we asked you about your spirituality in the past. So,
I do say that.
yeah.
It's a lie, but I do say that. Anyway, I think the best place to start for all you divine kin in the audience is I'm always imagining dragons, yes. So is Dove. Uh, your pantheon of origin. Just like what Dove said about mythological creatures. The culture that you come from is not necessarily where you're going to end up, but it's where you should start. It can be really helpful to study and make connections with gods who are part of that pantheon. And in my case, I do. Uh, as was previously discussed, I am a member of what most would know as a Lovecraftian pantheon. My father is a being that is probably most well known by the name of the King in Yellow, and I do, in fact, have a relationship with him. We talk fairly regularly, and of course, for those who are divinities of fictional pantheons, hopefully the previous section on pop culture paganism was helpful. Follow those steps. Reach out to the pantheon that you're from, whether they're from this world or not. But just like with mythological creatures, with the false enteric alterhumans, you don't have to stay there. There's lots of other pantheons. And maybe you're here because you don't get along with the pantheon that you came from. Don't feel trapped by that. You can always explore other traditions. And really, lots of gods are in multiple pantheons anyway, or have relationships with their neighbors. There's lots of crossover between, for instance, Hellenic and Egyptian. Uh, Hellenic mythology, focusing on the phoenix, is very open about the fact that the phoenix does not come from the Hellenic tradition, that the phoenix was adopted from Egyptian culture. Um, the Celtic goddess Brigid is also the Catholic saint, Saint Bridget, and is Mama Brigitte in voodoo traditions. And she is often described uh, in voodoo practices as Mama Brigitte, who is from Ireland. So you can be in multiple pantheons. You can have connections with multiple pantheons. Yes, voodoo is a very cool tradition. We've visited New Orleans several times and have a couple of contacts in the voodoo community in New Orleans. One of these days, I would love to go to New Orleans for Halloween. Yes, an example of cultural mixing that happened long ago. That deity ended up in that pantheon, which also connects to Eli's accent talking about having a grandmother from New Orleans. The New Orleans, one of the several New Orleans accents, is very similar to a New York accent, and it's because of Irish immigrants who were in New York moving to New Orleans en masse because of the racial tensions in New York. And so there was a lot of cultural crossover between these Irish immigrants and black folks in New Orleans. And I think that is how Mama Brigitte wound up in voodoo, but I'm not 100% certain about that, so don't quote me on it.
Yeah, we have a little bit of knowledge of that, that it was about indentured Irish servants, which was a type of oppressive servitude, mixing with enslaved people at the time, like, talking to each
So
other,
much earlier.
and taking each cultural practices from each other. Yeah, so
Mhm.
much earlier. At least that fascinating.
Which is so beautiful.
And a lot of the syncretic Christianity too is because of course, colonialism. Colonized people were sort of forced to be Christian, and so during
Hmm.
that time, they would. Um, I don't know if a mask is really the right word, because what it's become is a sort of fluidity where the deity is both deities sort of exist together, sometimes in a
Hmm.
form of a saint. But yeah, it's real cool. Love that stuff.
There was actually a period of history where to be initiated in voodoo, you had to already be Catholic.
Yes. Yeah, it was
That
a
is no longer true, but for a little while it was.
So I feel like we're getting off topic though, a little bit.
Yes. Moving on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about relationships with mortals and mortality. First of all, it's important to remember that we're all currently experiencing a mortal existence. We're here because we have something to learn. So don't convince yourself that you're better than anyone else, no matter who you are or were. We're all coming at this from the same perspective. And if divinity factors into your relationships with people around you at all, it has to be done responsibly. Divinity is part of my romantic relationships, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific mechanics of that later on in an 18 plus follow up. But consent is central. It's always an ongoing conversation between two adults, and I see it as a position of responsibility where my focus is on meeting their emotional and spiritual needs. Thumbs down to mortality. I agree wholeheartedly. Ugh. Uh, there's a concept that I think is relevant from Hellenismus here. The word is charis, hi charis, which is usually in English translated as charity. Uh, when you see in the Christian Bible the term the grace of God, the word that's being translated there is charis. It's a concept of reciprocal assistance and unconditional love. And that's, I think, where all divinity needs to approach their relationships. And really, everyone should with every relationship. We are here for the divine to learn something. Very much so.
Both the divine and the
Uh
non-divine are here for the divine
huh.
to learn something. This gets into our
Uh huh.
pantheistic beliefs that sort of like
Uh huh.
we're all shards of the divine, whether we're divine kin or not. We don't purport to know how it all works, but that's what we believe.
But we are the universe experiencing itself. I've always liked that concept. It feels very true to me. But this concept of charis, of reciprocity, is important in Hellenic practice. It's the idea that your relationship should not be transactional, but it's also not one sided. It's you do what you do, you practice these rituals because you love the divine, and the divine does what they do for you, not because you are practicing these rituals, but because they love you. And as long as everyone cares about everyone else who is involved in an interaction, everyone wins. approaching any of this with any kind of selfishness is a recipe for a toxic relationship. So, if as divine kin, you're going to be interacting with people in a way where they are acknowledging your divinity, that must be from this perspective of unconditional love and reciprocity. Our duty is to help others. That's what we're here for. That's what we exist for. Positions of authority are always positions of service, not privilege. It's responsibility. And we are constantly obliged to prove ourselves worthy and focus on improving ourselves. Because ultimately, that's what we're here for. We're here to learn. And the point of this section of this presentation is just to establish that there are ways of doing that that are healthy. There are ways of exploring your own divinity while you're here, even with other people, that can be healthy. It can be done in ways that you are interacting as a deity with mortals who are here with you, but it has to be done very carefully.
So that ends the portion that is uh, not the Sacred King portion that we'll do later on a different stage. I think we're
Mhm.
here for the Q&A portion. I know we've
Yes,
gone over by 26 minutes, so people may be like ready to bounce, but if there are
but
questions.
we can answer a few questions and then we will move on to an 18 plus portion that will be in a different location. And I'm going to switch us over to the panel questions channel. If anybody has any questions, please put them there because I can't read both channels at the same time. I do, however, see where be time gods. I'm right here as a time god. That is, in fact, one of the things that I do.
It's ironic though, right? That we went so far over. Time
Hmm.
goddess.
Unfortunately, I am not currently able to stop time
Yet. It's
yet.
probably a good thing. We'd be here all night. Just kidding. Yes, nerfed.
I do wish I could just trap us all here in this moment for a few hours and then we just go to bed and have a full night's sleep.
Ah, so you would give sleep to everybody. I like that.
Yeah.
The gift of sleep.
Stop time so we can talk all night and then start it up again so we can go to bed and have a normal.
That's true. We wouldn't have other panels then.
Well, we could
Are you
talk all night and then start it up before the next one.
Oh, I see. Are you seeing any
Let's see.
questions in the question?
First question: how do you practice a religion that's practices and church is stuck in a game you can't get to? Um, let's see. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Um, I suppose you're meaning in the context of I can't go to church and participate in a group ritual because the group that I would be doing that with is in another world. Yes. Okay. Let's see. One thing that you can do is see if there are any other people that you can find that are interested in practicing that tradition. You could build something here. So even if all you can find is one other person who's interested, that's still a group. Uh, there's a concept in Christianity. Uh, that the house of God is wherever one or more Christians is gathering in faith. So whatever you can do is good enough. You don't have to do anything that you can't do. Similarly, in pagan reconstruction, for instance, a lot of Hellenic religious holidays involve animal sacrifice, the mass slaughtering of cattle, and then having a party where the resulting food gets eaten by the entire community collectively together. Obviously, we can't do that today because most people don't have cattle and we don't have temples. We can't get 100 head of cattle together and feed 10,000 people. So we don't do that because we can't, so we don't have to. So whatever things are just off the table because of your situation, you don't have to do those things. You can find a symbolic representation of that thing. Or if there's a ritual that you would do in a church setting with a group, you could read the text, read the words, do whatever kind of symbolism that you can for it. So, for instance, we might not be able to slaughter cattle and do something that's a blood sacrifice. You're spilling blood out on the ground because we don't do that anymore. Use wine, pour out a glass of wine in honor of the gods instead of blood. Or Riss was talking about uh, rather than being able to physically hand a deity an object that's an offering, put it on an altar because she used to meet with that goddess face to face, but she can't do that anymore. So it gets put on an altar. There's ways that you can take whatever the tradition would be and make it more symbolic and practicable in your current situation. I'm sure there's ways to adopt a, to alter any group ritual to fit one person doing it. Just leave out the parts that you can't do, replace what you can with something that's more practicable. Yes, Itzy telling us to use hibiscus tea in place of blood and offering a shot glass of tea to the deities every morning.
Yeah, one thing I would just argue is that, all religions change over time. All faiths and
Hmm.
spiritualities change over time. People change them for their circumstances. So it's okay for you to also, ask your gods and deities and make compromises when it makes sense so that you are able to continue to practice. I think
Hmm.
that's very important, like that we don't, think of these things as static because in every religion that I can think of off the top of my head, it looks different than it looked 100 years ago, and it's
Yeah,
going to look different in 1,000 years.
they don't do the Catholic Mass in Latin anymore,
Right? Yeah, they changed that. It wasn't working for people, so they
which
changed it. And then there's some Catholics that they still do it in Latin.
uh you
So
made
yeah,
another important point. Ask the gods, whoever it is that is the focus of this tradition you're trying to practice. Ask them how you should make it work in your current circumstances. Meditate on it. Um, there's a
work
lot
with
of
your
forms
faith
of
leader.
uh-huh.
If you've got
There's
one,
a
like,
if you have
go
one
ahead.
with pop culture paganism. Sometimes there's not one, but again, if you can find a group of other people who are practicing it, they'll probably have ideas. But you can also, there's forms of meditation that are just sitting and focusing on a single thought, a single idea, sometimes to solve a problem. So, meditation, uh, if you are not in the position where you can just ask and actually hear an answer from the divine. Meditation can work. So can any form of divination that you like, tarot, um, pyromancy, which is seeing a vision in flames, whatever form of divination works for you, runestones. Do we have more questions? Yes. A healthy relationship with your gods means they won't ever ask you to do something that's outside your means. It never hurts to just ask.
And I think, I mean, personally, not just the one that's talking in the chat on the stage with me. We'll talk about my worship of her later, but like also gods that are not on this plane that you talk to, you can argue with them. I mean, this is
Hmm.
a big part of a lot of traditions, big on the Jewish tradition. Like you can argue with God. You can fight
Hmm.
God. It's okay. And I
Hmm.
think these types of things, I think that divine can personally, having a relationship with divine can has helped me conceptualize and think about uh, thinking of gods that are not on this plane. And just, I mean, personally, again, it's a personal belief, but we don't think of gods as like static and infallible and uh, beyond, to the extent that we can't have conversations with them. Again, that's a personal belief, but just
Hmm.
mine.
I mean, no one is perfect, even gods. If we didn't change, it would mean that we're not growing.
Yeah, exactly. And just to Melanoe's point, I never say her full name, but uh, sometimes the concept that a god might have that they're asking you to do, they may really have not the strongest grasp on what you're capable of in this reality. And so it's
Hmm.
okay to just like negotiate that and say, hey, that's really hard. They might still want you to do it, like at the end of the conversation, but it's good to have the conversation, I think, and kind of reality test with them what's feasible. This is how you end
Hmm.
up not, like doing things like you see people do crazy things in the name of their gods. And sometimes I want to ask, like, did you have a larger conversation where you were like, hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense? Just saying.
Yeah, yeah. It is, in fact, very much acceptable to say, I see why you want me to do that, but I need you to understand that there would be consequences that I'm not prepared to live.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which, another story, I feel like another story from the Bible. You have Abraham and Isaac, and he has this argument with God about sacrificing his kid. Like, I'm not going to do that. And
Hmm.
he wins the argument at the end of the day. So, again, like, I think that, especially in that tradition, it's just teaching you, like, don't just take it at face value, have the conversation.
And yeah, again, sometimes it has to be more metaphorical. Maybe you can't literally do the thing, but you can find a way to represent it symbolically in ritual. Do we
Exactly.
have any other questions? No one is typing in panel questions.
Yeah, I think they may want us to
I
move
think
on to
people are
that other
just excited
stage.
to move on to our sacred kink part.
Oh, thank you. We really enjoyed presenting it and seeing everybody's
Uh-huh.
thoughts in the chat. We're happy to
I hope
continue
some
the
of it was useful to
conversation.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to continue the conversation, folklore, myths, and
Uh-huh.
religion. And it looks like we got some catching up to do there too, so very exciting.
Yes. We will meet those of you who are interested in the sacred kink portion over in the 18 plus panel. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out here.
All right, we'll see you in a little bit to those of you that are coming to the second one. Take care.